can begin when you're ready.
For sure. So good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us here, nice, bright and early on Saturday morning. We really want to have this meeting today because there's so much important information that we found about our company that we want to share with you today. So thank you very much for everyone coming up here. Plus, the Jets game's tonight, so let's get it done nice and early. So first off, here, I would love to walk you through what we're going to be talking about today. So based upon our previous meetings, we've come up with a list of deliverables that you have described to us that we would love to go through and work through with you guys in order to solve your business problems. So what we've been discussing with our previous meetings with you is that you would like to expand further into Fort McMurray, Alberta, and eventually into taking over in Western Canada. So what we've gone through and through our analysis is to determine some of the concerns and risks that are involved within your current practices, as well as with future expansion into Fort McMurray. Because of those risks and concerns, we have come up with 3 different alternatives that we feel would be that are all quite possible for you guys. In order to go through those alternatives, we have come up with 3 decision criteria and have evaluated those alternatives against them. This has led us to come up with one clear recommendation for you guys, going for you guys as well as us as a company, into Fort McMurray, as well as we've gone through and kind of analyzed the risks and other potential concerns concerning our recommendation. So taking a look here, there are several risks. We've kind of composed them in this way to show the fact that all these risks are not independent. Collectively, they affect us as a company. Here, you can see our first risk is the economic recession that we're currently experiencing here in Fort McMurray. So not only are oil prices decreasing right now, but also we're having problems with the forestry industry, as well as just the overall construction industry. These are very key indicators of an economic recession that is affecting us as a company, because if the forestry industries are declining, the oil companies declining, as well as the construction industries declining, therefore our company of providing rental equipment will also be declining, as people will not be taking on more of these products. Second, our previous expansion struggles. So as you're fully aware, back in 2005, we expanded into Fort McMurray and acquired 5 additional businesses. However, 3 of these businesses are no longer with us due to the fact of our struggles into the expansion. So with our recommendation, we're looking to explain how we can better suit it within the Fort McMurray area. And one of those reasons is the fact that we purchased companies that were in dire financial situations. They were already bankrupt, and we tried to survive them, or try to salvage them. Next, we're taking a look at political uncertainty. This is specifically concerning oil sands in themselves. Right now, oil sands, the main distribution for oil sands is from Canada into the United States. Right now, as we're all aware of, there's high political uncertainty concerning Canada and the United States going forward. Yes, right now, Mr. Trump might be pro-Canadian oil sands, but the next day, who knows? That's a big risk for us as a company, as we don't know where the oil sands will be going in the future. Therefore, will people be requiring our equipment to process it? Next is low brand awareness. So within Western Canada, we have a very low presence for the products that we sell, which are Komatsu products. As a result, people aren't aware of what products that we're selling. Therefore, we have to be able to become frontline present within consumers. Next is our overly reliant on Komatsu products. So right now, our main distribution is fully focused on rental and selling of Komatsu construction equipment. But what happens if Komatsu goes under? How does this affect us as a company? What if they are involved in a large scandal? How does that affect us as a company? We need to look at ways of how we can diversify this risk and expand our offerings. Lastly is the high competition within Fort McMurray. With the Komatsu products that we're offering, they're also in direct competition with Caterpillar as well as JC. This provides a high competition in order for us to provide these products to consumers, as we have to provide better offerings for them. This can involve better customer quality, more advanced or unique product offerings, as well as bundle offerings. So in order to go through and analyze our decisions that we've proposed, our recommendations, we have come up with 3 decision criteria. The first is that we'd like to see company growth. Obviously, as a company, in order to expand, we need to be able to capitalize on market growth. Right now, we're only sitting at about 3.11% of the Fort McMurray market, and we would love an opportunity to help you guys expand into that. We'll be able to measure this market growth based upon the equipment rental sales that are within the Fort McMurray region. Next, we'll be evaluating our recommendation based upon the level of risk that it involves. So not only will this be focusing on the overall market conditions that are prevalent with oil, forestry, and construction, but we'll be also looking at ways that we can expand the product offerings that you guys rent to consumers in order to provide a little bit of diversity for that risk. Lastly, we'll be looking at ways that we can strengthen our relations with Komatsu. So they have shown that we are their #1 Canadian distributor. However, there have been almost allegations or borderline threats that they will go with another company if we don't expand into Western Canada. So we have to look at ways that we can still mend and maintain these relationships going forward. And with that being said, I'd love to pass it off to Adrian to talk about our alternatives.
Thank you. So I'm going to start discussing the first alternative we've come up with. It's to sell the 2 locations that we have in Fort McMurray right now. So we would be exiting the market due to the high uncertainty that we have with the oil prices and the political uncertainty. So we would get out of that and reduce our risk as a company. However, that does bring some other types of risks, as we may lose our deal with Komatsu because they are looking to expand to the Fort McMurray market. If we lose them as a supplier, then that would impact our operations in Eastern Canada, and that could really damage us as a company. And we would also lose our market share that we have established in Fort McMurray. So if we look at our decision criteria, we would be losing 3.11% of that market share and negatively impact our operations. It is low risk, however, because we are getting out of that market, that highly volatile market. But again, we are losing that strong relationship with Komatsu. We have that running the risk of losing them as a supplier, and that would be very negative. So if we look at our market share, so as you can see that our revenue currently would be 8.7 million. That's what we're generating right now, and the total market share is 280 million. So again, we would be losing that 3.11%. However, we would be gaining some revenue from the sale. So we'd be gaining approximately 7.8 million if we look at what our profit before income tax is right now, and then we times it by the amount the target selling price that most companies are running right now, which is approximately 6 to 7. So if you use the average of that for 6.5, we would be receiving 7.8 million for our 2 stores. However, the opportunity cost of our stores would be close to 6.1 million. So we'd be losing that revenue just for those 5 years, and that's not considering the future losses past those years. So looking at that advantage is not a huge advantage to selling. If we look at the second alternative, which would be to buy already existing stores located in Fort McMurray. So our idea would be to buy only 51% of the shares of the company, so that we would have controlling interest, and we could introduce Komatsu products to those stores and really strengthen our relationships with them. And because they're already successful, this could help mitigate the risk of bankruptcy, which we've faced in the past with partnering with bankrupt companies. That's really helping mitigate that risk and make sure that we are successful. It would also be eliminating our own competition, so it can help make us bigger and really be able to have more of a market share. So if we look at the potential growth for our company, between the alternatives, we have the 3 stores alternatives that would range for the company growth. It is a moderate level of risk. We are still expanding in an industry that is highly risky, but we are doing it with stores that are already successful and already have the knowledge for Fort McMurray. And again, we can strengthen our relationships with Komatsu because we are expanding their operations, which is their goal as a company. So we're helping align. So So again, if we take a look at the calculations for finding the potential market share, so we're just breaking down the revenue that they have currently based on the total market share. Based on the alternatives that we can pick between these three stores, we see that there is that nice increase in market share. Lastly, we have the alternative of building a new store from scratch. This does run the risk because it is such a high investment, and it's a very long-term investment as you're building it up from scratch. You would have full control, and we could really establish it as we would like. However, again, there's that high capital requirement to begin the stores, and it is very long-term, so it would take a while to generate some revenues. And also, due to our previous experience of trying to expand and coming up short with some, having to close down some stores, it could be a high level of risk. So if you look at over here of the breakdown of the future forecast for the company, so we would only be seeing positive revenues in year 4. So we would be losing money for the next 3 years, and based on the volatility of the market, we might not have those 3 years. We might go bankrupt if we do suffer these losses in the first 3. But we would see an increase in market share by approximately 5%. So again, we would be increasing our presence, but there is a chance of risk that if we don't succeed, it could really damage our company. So if you take a look at our decision criteria, just to sum up some of our alternatives, really seems that we should really buy the stores that are already existing. This is decreasing our risk as a company, but we're still able to expand and still really establish that reputation, a relationship with Komatsu, and really strengthen them and not lose them as a supplier. So we're not damaging our other operations, and it can lead to some really great opportunities in the long run. So I'll now get Cody to talk a little bit more about that recommendation.
Perfect, thank you. So as Adrian kind of summed up, our recommendation for you is to buy 51% of the existing stores in Fort McMurray and to increase our market share in northern Alberta. And so with that, we have 3 options with our recommendation. The company provided us with 3 alternative companies to look at to acquire, and we've identified some risks, and we'll also go into some calculations as to the profitability of each alternative. So the first one we looked at was Transverse, and some of the issues we recognize with them is they have a product sales that is a mix that is quite different from ours. So we're currently selling rental equipment. They're into a lot of the small tools and some of the niche industries within there. So there may be some conflict between our product brands and maybe the products that Komatsu can provide for these stores. There's also the issue with customer retention, ensuring that we're retaining these customers, and that's a risk across all 3 of these alternatives as we go forward. For Kaildan, they have a larger geographic area, so they're situated in more than just Fort McMurray. They're in some of the smaller communities surrounding Fort McMurray, and that might be a risk with us as going forward. With the uncertainty, we're not sure if it's the best alternative to spread the company out across Alberta before we know that this endeavor is going to work. And this also would be the most costly of the 3 alternatives. On the third alternative, Vanguard, the cost that they're currently asking for is a very high premium in return for what we're getting on the equity. And also they have most of their selling goes towards the forestry industry, which adds another level of uncertainty on top of the oil and gas. So if we take a look at all 3 of them combined, we can see the selling price right now, most companies are asking about 6 to 7 times their net profits, or net pre-tax profits. So Transverse, they're making about $13.5 million pre-tax this year, so that would look at their asking price of about $87 million. Their equity right now is at $74 million, so we're paying about $1.18 for every dollar worth of equity we're retaining, which means we're paying a little bit of premium, and those premiums come in the way of goodwill, which is the intangible assets that a company has, such as the owner's knowledge or the customer list and the reputations within the industry. We can look at Kaildan. They're making about $17.1 million this year, bringing their asking price at about $111, and their equity is 85. So we're paying a little bit higher premium than $1.30. And Vanguard would be the most premium you're paying. You're looking at approximately $3.18 you're paying for every dollar with equity. So with that, we would recommend that purchasing 51% of Transverse for $44.7 million, and we're going to look for obtaining financing through Komatsu in order to really penetrate the market of Fort McMurray and get our name out there. So if we're looking at how this breaks down in terms of financing costs, we have a total asking price of $87.75 million. 51% of that, $44.75. And Komatsu has been very generous in offering us 70% of the financing through them. So that allows us to get $31 million from them at about 2.7%, which is a fairly good interest rate. And then we have to finance about $13.5 million internally, which we believe is feasible with our current operations coming out of Eastern Canada. So we're looking at about $845,000 of interest payments, which comes out of that 2.7% of the $31,000. So that is a fairly substantial amount of cash going out every year. However, we're looking at a return on revenue at a higher rate than that, which will bring us money and increase our contribution margin at the end of the day. So what I touched on before, the aspect of goodwill there, this is what we would recognize on our financial statements, on our consolidated financial statements going forward. And basically, it tells us that we've paid about $13.6 million more than the company was worth. And like I mentioned, that takes into account some of the things that you aren't going to show up on your balance sheet, such as the owner's knowledge of the industry, their relationships with current consumers and customers, and their knowledge of how the industry is changing and ways to best service those customers. And along with this, we would recommend keeping the current management staff so acquiring the business, but not changing the way they're currently running. So not taking over operations necessarily as day-to-day operations, but becoming the financier of this operation in Western Canada and bringing those Komatsu products in. So they're currently selling Caterpillar and JC equipment. We would remove some of the JC equipment and bring in Komatsu in order to get Komatsu that market penetration they're looking for going forward. Some additional long-term aspirations we could think of as we develop into the Alberta market and look for some more alternatives is bringing on the new suppliers onto the Ontario branch. So with this new store, we're going to have Komatsu products and also sell Caterpillar products, as the current owner Mark has a very good relationship with Caterpillar. So we could look going forward to adding some of the Caterpillar products in our eastern stores in Eastern Canada, which would give us be able to obtain more of the market share in Eastern Canada. And also, like I mentioned before, keeping those executives that are located in the Fort McMurray branches, stores on, being Mark being the owner of the store, because he has such a great knowledge of the industry. And as we alluded to before, when we tried to expand into the market before, we had issues with management being desynchronized from our Fort McMurray operations, and that led to some problems going forward. So having someone that knows the industry, knows the market, and is able to service those customers, having them in store in those Alberta branches will really help us ensure long-term success in Alberta. So tying this all back together with some of the risks, the economic recession, that's going to be a risk that is going to be tough to mitigate as a company. We really have to look for ways to minimize it, not necessarily get rid of it. So our alternative of purchasing stores that are already established mitigates a little bit of that risk because we're not dumping a whole lot more capital that would be required to build those stores. It's a little bit less costly of an alternative. Talking to those previous expansion struggles, we're going to keep the key staff on and ensure that we have the knowledge and the expertise in order to service our clients. Political uncertainty, again, that's one of those risks that's just going to happen. Through constant analysis of the political environment, we'll keep track on maybe some other industries that might be able to get into with our equipment selling. Low brand awareness by bringing into that company, by keeping the executives and the companies the way they are in Fort McMurray, that limits the brand uncertainty. And by adding Caterpillar as one of our product lines, it reduces our over-reliance on Komatsu. And highly competitive by acquiring another firm. We're reducing our competitiveness by acquiring a top competitor. So with that, that brings us close to our presentation. I want to thank you guys and open the floor to any questions.
Komatsu is a Japanese company. Do you think we're going to have trouble getting foreign products into the Alberta market when the other manufacturers are selling North American brands?
I think definitely. But with those relationships we already have with Komatsu and able to bring those products into Ontario, we're able to use those same supply chains and bring those into Alberta and remain competitive and effective with the way we bring our products into the country.
Just more to the customers that are gonna buy them, are they gonna embrace the Japanese product?
Which is great. Apologies. Yes, I think one of the things is ensuring that we're keeping Caterpillar on with Komatsu in the new stores will bring the customers into the stores, and they might see products that they're not used to or they haven't thought of before as different alternatives to their current products. So keeping those two brands within the same store kind of increases the exposure that the customers will have.
So then with that, is Komatsu gonna have issues when they're gonna become second fiddle to Caterpillar when they're financing their operations?
If I could step in, yeah, absolutely. So what we feel like is within Western Canada, Komatsu does not have a name there yet. People don't know who it is. So in order to build that brand awareness, they have to be able to pair up with another company to get customers into the door. So once people come in and see Caterpillar and have Komatsu on the same level at the same store, gives that the exact same high prestige. So if customers are looking for something with Caterpillar, it doesn't meet their needs, right away they can go to Komatsu. So yes, Komatsu might have a problem right away, that they might have to sacrifice a little bit of market sales to Caterpillar. However, we feel that over time, there'll be a shift towards more Komatsu products.
So with that approach, if
Yes.
Komatsu doesn't agree with that, do we have the funds to finance the project now?
As you saw within the presentation, that 70% of the debt financing right now we're hoping will come from Komatsu. However, we believe that with our current operations, that we could go to a bank and be able to acquire a loan fairly similar to this as well. We might have a little bit higher interest payments because of that. However, we feel that with negotiations with Komatsu, we could probably make this work.
Just with the economic situation, how you're showing losses for the first 3 years, how would Komatsu react considering economic and turning further down and possibly have more stores going bankrupt?
This is a key point of doing it where you're buying more established companies who are profitable. So they already are generating revenues, so they already have that customer base that is coming in and generating profits for the companies that are existing right now. So if we can capitalize on their success and introduce Komatsu products here, where we wouldn't necessarily be losing by purchasing the companies, the 51%, you're limiting your upfront investment, limiting your loss, and also Komatsu's loss by implementing a more established company.
How are we gonna convince people to sell us only 51%? Are they gonna want a bigger premium for that?
Looking at the price, there could be a situation where the company demands more. However, we took the average of the 6 and 7, assuming that would be where the company was. There's always room for negotiation going up and down. However, we feel that given the price right now, we have the capacity to maybe take a little bit higher price if that's what they're demanding, or have the negotiating. But with our presence in Eastern Canada, we do have the power to negotiate some of the terms on our behalf, just being such a large a name in West.
So us being a small player in that market, we're only at 3% and there are bigger players on that, right? Why would they want to stick around for 49%?
It's the company we're looking at acquiring is an owner-managed business. The gentleman Mark, he built the business from the ground up all by himself. So we believe as owner-managed, working for an owner-managed company, we see the love and desire to continue business. It's not, at the end of the day, it's not just all about profits. It's about providing services for your customers. And if he's able to stay on and be able to see those faces every day and help those customers that he currently is, believe that this is a great alternative for him to increase some of the financial side of it for himself as well.
That's all the time we have for questions.